you will learn how to create an animated short commercial. This commercial will be set up as a squared animation, which is ideal for use on Instagram. This Adobe Animate CC tutorial actually starts in Adobe Photoshop CC. In here I've created a little character to promote a science museum's robots exhibition. As you'll notice, the robot has been built up in layers. I've even put in a group of layers that will form the mouth. This will give the illusion that the LED lights in there are actually blinking. Let's check the names again of the layers. These names will show in Animate CC as well, so it's advisable to give these layers a logical name. Layer 1 needs to be wheel in this case. All these layers need to be imported in Animate CC as animate layers. So let's go to Animate CC. From the welcome screen you can choose from a lot of handy presets. But for this character animation we want to have a squared aspect ratio like 1080 width and 1080 height. We will want to link all these layers together in order to move the complete character quite easily. For that reason, we'll leave the default ActionScript 3.0 as it is. By selecting Create, the welcome screen will disappear and the interface of Animate CC will build up. The most important things for now in the interface are the stage and the timeline. We want to see our character on the stage and all the layers in the timeline below. Now go to File and Import to Stage to place the Photoshop layers directly onto your stage. This will give you a window with lots of information about your layers. But the most important thing is that you'll need to check if the layers will be imported as animated layers. The group of the mouth layers can be converted to a movie clip symbol, which will make the mouth layers easy to animate later on. You've now learned how to build up your character in Photoshop and how to import those layers in a new Adobe Animate CC file. Let's start linking those layers in the next video tutorial. In the second video tutorial, you'll learn how to link your layers together in order to animate the character easily. We have imported quite a lot of layers in this new Animate file. Luckily I've named my layers so I know what content is placed on those layers. By default, space is a bit limited within the timeline panel. We will pull the top end of the panel a bit upwards to balance the space between the timeline and the stage a bit better. Let's enable the Show Parenting view within the timeline panel. Linking layers allows you to rig the character. Just figure out what the most important part is of your character and that layer will be the parent of all layers. Of course, children listen to their parents, so the idea of linking the layers is that you create a hierarchy of layers, children, listening to their parents. In this case, the body of the robot is the most important part. It's also the easiest part to select and drag around. An arm is a child of the body. Let's select the arm, drag it towards the body layer and let go. Do the same for the other arm. To test if this works, please drag around the body and see if the arms will follow. Undo to put it back to the original position. Now link the wheel and the neck to the body. The head to the neck and the mouth, eyes and eyebrows to the head. Give it one final check to make sure that all layers are attached correctly. With all these tasks done, you are ready to animate the character. And that's what we'll talk about in the next video tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to discuss motion tween and graphic symbols in order to make our little robot move. So at first I would like to select my body and move it off stage. When we clip everything that's outside of the stage, our content, this is what finally will end up in our export at the end. So it's always good to have a little clean look at what your product's gonna look like. Of course, I want to see my robot in order to make it move, and I want to make use of the right-click motion tween option. And the motion tween will need our object to be a symbol. So I need to convert it at first into a symbol. So I'm going to go for modify, convert to symbol, and give it a name, body for instance, and I'm going to leave it as a graphic symbol. And now what I need to do is right click and create a motion tween. And that will give us 1 second of time to animate. And of course I can extend this to 2 seconds if I want to. Immediately you will see that the only layer that has got 2 seconds of time is the body layer. So I want to see everything else as well. So I'm going to select the final frames over here underneath frame number 60. I'll right click and just insert a frame. And that will keep everything visible until the end of the animation. The next thing that I would like to do is make sure that my robot makes an entrance. So I'm going to select my robot at frame number 20, move it onto the stage, there we go, and this is our first animation. Now probably it will need to lean forward a bit to anticipate on the motion. So what I could do is rotate our robot a little bit, but that makes it rotate from the center of the whole selection. I want to make it rotate right over here where it connects to the wheel. So what I could do is select the free transform tool, select the body, and just move the white dot over here where it's connecting to the wheel. And now this is going to be the rotation. Looks much better. And when it comes to a stop, it needs to move backwards, forward again a bit, something like this. And while I'm doing this, it will make all these keyframes for my little robot. Probably it's a little bit too slow. So what I could do is just select all these keyframes over here. Move them towards frame number 10, 11. When you've converted an object to a symbol, they will live in your library over here. So everything is already converted in here. So I want to make a motion tween of the head as well. Let's right click, create motion tween. That will give me the same orange bar as well. And of course I will need to rotate the head a bit. But in this case the rotation point is also on the wrong spot. So let's alter that in frame number 1. Something like this. Of course I would like to rotate the wheel as well. Let's select the wheel, which is already a symbol, a graphic symbol. When you double click on it, it will open up the wheel. So I'm not in scene 1 anymore, but in an underlying timeline. Let's convert this to a symbol as well, because I want to make it rotate. Let's add a motion tween in there. Let's select the motion tween, search for the properties, and let's say, well, it needs to rotate about 2 times clockwise in the amount of 1 second. And we can already see that there's another extra keyframe. Let's go back to scene 1 and see if that works. Only it keeps on spinning in the end. Of course, when it comes to a stop, it will need to stop. So let's select it over here. Make another keyframe by hand with the right click. Insert keyframe. And because of the fact that this is a graphic symbol, we can say, well, I don't want it to loop anymore in the properties. I want it to play a single frame. And it already selects frame number 13, because that's the position where we are at the moment. And that will make sure that it will stop. So this is how you work with motion tween and combining it with graphic symbols. And in the next video we will bend the arms with another technique. In this tutorial we are going to discuss the Asset Warp tool. This is a new tool and it's a fantastic tool to deform your bitmap graphics and your vector graphics. The one thing that you aren't allowed to do is deform symbols. So in this case the right arm of the robot was turned into a symbol, a graphic symbol. I don't want it to be a symbol anymore, so I go to modify and break apart to make sure that it's a bitmap again. And of course it does the same thing when you are working with your vector graphics. Just don't use symbols. So now what I can do is select the Asset Warp tool, select the area where the hand should be of a robot, and immediately shows you the mesh of the arm. I can select the elbow area and the shoulder part. And now when I'm selecting the hand, it allows me to deform the arm. When I don't want to see the mesh, just disable show mesh, and now it shows me what it looks like without the mesh. And when I'm gonna start this animation, it needs to be somewhere over here, I think, to make it a bit more dynamic. Now when I want to let it come to a stop, the hand needs to swing behind its back a bit more, so I will need to create a keyframe. So this trick doesn't work with a motion tween. We will need to make keyframes by hand and use the classic tween instead. So let's right click on the location where we want to stop, insert a keyframe. Let's swing this one behind its back, this one as well. Of course, there's no animation in there, it's more of a stop motion right now. But when I add the classic tween with a right click in the middle of those two keyframes, classic tween, it will do the trick. There we go. And probably it's starting a bit too soon with moving behind his back. So maybe it's better to make sure that his hand is a bit more off. Let's right click, insert the keyframe. And let it sit there a bit more. There we go. Another keyframe. Right click, insert keyframe. Make sure that there is another classic tween in the middle. And let's move it back again. Of course, we can do the same thing with the other arm as well. Let's speed things up in the recording. And that's how you can work with the Asset Warp tool. Pretty cool. And like I said, it also works on the vector graphics. So artwork made in Illustrator or Animate itself will work perfectly with the Asset Warp tool. Our video is almost done. Let's get ready to export out our video in the next tutorial.
So in this video, we're going to take a look at how to use classic tweens. This character is comprised of a bunch of different body parts that have been converted to symbols. So all of the assets that I've drawn to create this character are done using object drawing mode. But in order to animate first, what we need to do if we're going to use classic tweens is to convert every object into a symbol, a graphic symbol. And to convert an object to a symbol, go to the Modify menu and then Convert to Symbol. And then in the Convert to Symbol dialog box, give it an appropriate name. And then the type of symbol we want is graphic. So use the drop-down menu to select graphic if it isn't already selected. And then hit OK. And now you'll see our object has been converted to a symbol, but the next step is to grab the free transform tool or hit Q on your keyboard. And you'll notice the white dot in the center. That's the center point of this symbol. When I rotate and scale this symbol, it is all based on where that dot is. So what we want to do next is edit the center point location so that this object will hinge naturally. So for the ear, I'm going to move the symbol to where the ear connects to the body. And now you'll notice when we rotate and scale and skew the symbol, it'll look and act more anatomically correct. So repeat this same procedure for all of the other objects that your character has. Once every single object has been converted to a graphic symbol, you're ready to start animating. In the first keyframe, I'm going to move the character out of frame. So I'm going to click and drag the parent symbol, which is the body, and all the child symbols are going to follow. So if I click and drag to highlight a range of frames across all these layers, then I can right-click and select Create Classic Tween. And this will apply a classic tween to all of these layers. Now, while this highlight is still active, I can then go over to the Properties panel, click on Classic Ease, and I'm going to choose Easing Out and Cubic as the curve. And what this is going to do is just apply a nice, soft easing out to the character. So as it reaches its highest point, it slows down to simulate gravity. So now that I have basically the whole motion down, I go back into these layers that have tweens, and I create keyframes on various layers to then alter what happens to some of these symbols. And here I'm going to take the ears and just move them down. I want the force of gravity to play or have more of an impact on the symbols themselves. So here I'm just rotating the character a little bit on frame 1. And you'll see now what I like about this, using this procedure, is being able to scrub the timeline and getting sort of an immediate feedback on what's going on in terms of how these symbols are reacting to how I'm rotating them and positioning them. So here I am at the very bottom or beginning of the animation. I'm selecting various smaller parts of the character and rotating them. Because what I like is this overall motion, but I also like lots of individual, smaller, fine-tune motions that are happening. And so, again, I'm making adjustments, going back into certain layers and creating additional keyframes just to play around with the timing of certain aspects of this character. And having the tweens already present allow me to scrub the timeline again once I make a change and get feedback visually on what is happening. And it doesn't mean I'm making all the right edits as I go. It's a lot easier for me to make an edit, play it back, and see if it works or not. And if it doesn't, I make adjustments. And so that looks pretty good to me overall. So what I want to do now is have the character fall back out of frame. So I'm going to actually insert an equal amount of frames and create keyframes across all these layers at the end of my animation. And then I'm going to move the character back down off screen. I'm going to select a range of frames across all these layers. And then over the highlighted area, I'm going to right click and select Create Classic Tween. And then again, like we did before, in Properties panel, choose Easing In and the Cubic Curve. And then what I want to do is create smaller motions within some of the limbs. And so here what I'm doing is I'm going to convert the leg symbol into another symbol. Therefore, I basically am nesting a symbol inside a symbol. And here I'm going to actually take the center point and move it so that the leg hinges properly. Now inside this symbol, I'm going to animate a looping animation. So the easiest way to do that is before we even apply any animation at all, just go down the timeline and hit F6. And this will insert a keyframe that contains the same exact contents as in the previous keyframe. So now we have basically bookended this timeline where we have the leg in exactly the same position in both of these keyframes. Now we're going to apply all our animation in between these keyframes. And this will ensure that the animation inside this symbol is going to loop perfectly. Create a few more additional keyframes. And what I want this leg to do is kind of wobble back and forth really quickly. So after applying a classic tween, I can get a sense for the timing of it. And I want it to be a little bit faster. So I'm going to remove a few frames in between these keyframes. And that's going to get the leg to kick back and forth much faster. And so once I feel like I got it to a good place, I'm going to repeat this entire procedure for the arm as well. Again, creating additional keyframes, adjusting the artwork, selecting an area across these frames, right-clicking over it, and creating a classic tween. And so back out on the main timeline, I'll make a few more adjustments as I'm doing here with the ears, a little bit of rotation here as the character starts to descend. With the full effect in place, you can see how fun and easy it is to work with classic tweens in Adobe Animate CC.
Where we've learned how to import Photoshop files, work with layer parenting, animate with motion tweens and graphic symbols. We have met the asset warp tool, and our video is finally done and ready to export as a video file, and we want to upload it to our social media channels. And a very perfect format for that is to export out as an MP4 file. So when I want to export out, I go to File, Export, and then Export Video. When you want to export out as a movie, it will give you an SWF file, a shockwave flash file. But I want to have an MP4 file in the end, so I'm going to go for File, Export Video. And in here I'm going to double check the size. It's 1080 width, 1080 height. Exactly the same as I started with, so that's perfect. And the option to convert it into the media encoder is enabled, and that will actually give me the MP4 file. I can browse to the select to the location where I want to save it. That's in my robot folder, so that's perfect. And now just export out the video. And that will render a high quality video file at first. So a huge file size, but in the end, this file will be converted in the media encoder into an MP4 file. So that's perfect for now. Export. It will render the video and open the media encoder and will give you the media encoder queue. In here my file is already waiting and I want to convert it into an MP4 file, and for that reason I will need to select the H.264 and that will actually give me an MP4 file. I'm going to leave the custom settings as this. That was perfect already, and when I scroll over to this end we can check if it's an MP4 file, and that's exactly what it says. So let's start the render queue. Select the blue text over here, and that will give me my final video file. So this is our little character, originally designed in Photoshop, animated in Adobe Animate CC, and exported out as an MP4 file.
We've got an animated birthday greeting synced to lyrics. Modified motion presets animate the text over the cake. Now let's use the camera to zoom in for a tight shot of each text animation and have the camera zoom out at the end. Here we have multiple lines of text animated and synced up with the song, but all of the animation happens in the same shot. It would be much more interesting to be zoomed in to the animation of each group of text, cut to each animated grouping, and zoom out at the end to show that the text was all on the frosted cake with the festive background. We can make the cuts and the zoom with Animate's camera. Click on the camera tool. Animate adds a special camera layer to the top of the timeline. Let's add a keyframe on the camera layer for each animated group of text. Click on the first span and scrub the timeline to see the group of text when it's all on screen. The camera controls that appear over the stage let you adjust the rotation and the zoom. Make sure Zoom, which is the icon of the camera in the magnifying glass, is selected. Then drag the slider all the way to the right. Dragging the slider once only zoomed in part of the way to our text. Look in the Properties panel on the Tool tab. You'll see that we increased the zoom to 200%. We can enter the amount of the zoom here or continue to drag to the right until we get the text where we want it. At about 350%, we're zoomed in enough, but the text is above the viewable area. Click and drag upward to move the text into view. You can move it side to side to help position it too. That's our first shot. Select a frame at the end of the next animated text sequence. We see that the zoom is back to what it was originally. Zoom in and position the camera for this shot like we did the first one. Continue setting the zoom and position the camera for all the shots except for the last one. We want the last shot to animate zooming out from the close-up to a full view of the cake. First, let's click on the span, right-click, and in the context menu, select Create Motion Tween to let Animate know we want to animate it. The camera is currently set to the original zoom of 100%. That's the zoom we want for the end. So click on the last frame, right-click, and insert a keyframe. Go back to the frame in the span where all the text is on screen. Zoom in to a close-up of the text. When we make a change on a motion tween, Animate automatically makes a keyframe for us. If we want this keyframe to be the start of a motion tween, we can drag it to the beginning of the span. Scrub the timeline to see what it looks like. We can also double-click on the camera's motion tween to open up the motion editor and add ease to how it zooms out. Select Scale, which is the camera's zoom. The curve represents how the zoom, or whatever other property you select, is being animated. Below the graph is the Add Ease button. Click it to see the presets. Twirl open Simple and select Medium. The ease keeps the zoom on screen for a shorter period of time and transitions over a longer period of time to the final zoom. Play it to see the final kinetic type animation with the added camera moves.
It's your birthday, yes it is, it's your birthday, yes it is, it's your birthday, so happy birthday to you, yes to you.
When we're ready to export our video, go to File, Export, Export Video/Media. Animate uses Adobe Media Encoder to render your video, so you can set it to render immediately or have it added to the queue. Then click Export. With Animate, we've made an animated birthday greeting in which we created effects with decorative strokes, gradients, symbols, and advanced layers, animated with motion tweens and motion presets, and added sound and camera moves.